Hi, I'm Lottie, and welcome to Backwards Compatible, a series where we take a look at games from our past and talk about what made them good, bad, or just confusing. Now, I really want to stress that the purpose of this series isn't to laugh and mock the games, but to question where they came from and why they came to be. In today's episode, we'll be looking at Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge. Now, Belmont's Revenge was released in a time where Castlevania was riding the action platformer genre, and it was riding it all the way to the top. People wanted more, and more importantly, they wanted the ability to play it on the go. So in October 26, 1989, Konami released Castlevania The Adventure for the Game Boy. Everyone was ecstatic. We can finally play Castlevania on a train, we can play it in the bath, we can play it at the beach. But in reality, what people got was a neutered down, mediocre entry for the series, with many home stays being removed. And that's where Belmont's Revenge comes in. Released in Japan as Dracula Densetsu 2, The Legend of Dracula 2, on July 12, 1991, for the Game Boy. Then in North America of August the same year. And as a side note, I actually found it really hard to find a definitive date for the US release. The best I could find was just August. It was eventually released in Europe more than a year later on November 26, 1992. Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge came out to critical acclaim. Many reviews touted it as one of the best and only way to get the Castlevania experience on the Game Boy. Many celebrated the return of sub-weapons and a more fast-paced feeling gameplay as opposed to the previous series Castlevania The Adventure. The title, Castlevania 2's Belmont's Revenge, confused many, as in July 1987, a game holding the same numerical title was released for the NES, Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. This led to many believing it was just a simple port of the NES game. And this is where my biggest issue with Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge comes in. It shouldn't have been called Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge, it should have been called Castlevania The Adventure 2 Belmont's Revenge. You see, because this is a game that's a direct sequel to Castlevania The Adventure for the Game Boy originally. Anyway, in Belmont's Revenge you play once again as the Game Boy Vania's home protagonist, Christopher Belmont. Around 15 years after the supposed defeat of Dracula, Christopher settles down as a child, Soliel, mistranslated in the US release as Solio. After 15 years of hiding and waiting for his powers to return, Dracula returns and on Soliel's 15th birthday uses magic to malform and twist Soliel's powers, turning them against him and making him transform into a demon that aids in his revival. With his power once again restored to their former glory, Dracula raises 5 castles for Christopher to battle through. The aforementioned castles aren't just funky little piece of exposition. They're integral to the gameplay of Belmont's Revenge, as the 4 castles act for the first and, as far as I can remember, the only time a stage select is featured in a Castlevania game. After beating the first 4 castles, the ability to travel to Dracula Castle unlocks. Each of the 4 castles feature their own music and their own aesthetic. The castles are named the Cloud, Rock, Plant, and Crystal Castle. You can tackle whichever one you want and it will have no effect on the gameplay and have no effect on difficulty, at least as far as I can tell. This may be because that most castles, for the most part, share a very similar enemy pool, with only 1 or 2 unique enemies. Each, however, do feature a unique end boss that are ultimately fairly easy. The hardest boss of the 4 is by far the Rock Castle's boss, the Iron Doll, who has 2 phases, the first being rather slow and easy, and the second shedding his bulky armor and becoming fast, nimble, and a pain in the ass to deal with. The easiest of the 4 castle bosses is by far Darkseid, the boss for the Crystal Castle, who only has 1 attack really. It's just a downward lightning strike, which causes fire to rip over the floor. Now the fire is easily jumpable, and the boss can be defeated within maybe a minute. Once you enter the castle proper, this is where the real fight begins. Your first boss fight is against your son, whose attack patterns contain a lot of Belmont moves with a high focus on the whip. This fight is still reasonably easy, however directly after this is a Dracula fight, which is a pain. He's hard, he's annoying, and also very fun at the same time. Now I sucked up fighting him because I'm horrendous at reading attack patterns. However, his attack and teleport points are not randomized, and with multiple tries can be bested easily after learning patterns, leading to one of my favourite and more memorable Dracula fights in the series. And the level design of the castle proper doesn't slack either. It features a lot more tricky platforming, with enemies often placed on small platforms with barely enough room for the player and enemy sprite, meaning you have to tactically take care of them before you jump onto them. There's also a lot more traps and a lot more crashing platforms, one of which had me stumped and led me to look up a guide on how to figure out how to get past it. However, honestly, that may just be due to my own stupidity. I'm unsure. One thing that must always be mentioned when talking about Castlevania games is of course the soundtrack. And boy howdy, does Belmont's Revenge feature an amazing assortment of tracks, all composed beautifully, specifically with the Game Boy's limited sound chip in mind, by Hidehiro Funauchi. He was able to truly capture the action-packed and high-stakes feeling of the NES game, while creating an original and endearing soundtrack that sounds nothing like that of the previous games. For example, the first stage of Dracula's castle features a theme called The Original Sin. Here's a quick listen. Track works beautifully within the constraints of the Game Boy, still featuring multi-layered tracks, still sounding absolutely amazing. Of course, this isn't the only great track in the game. Every single song in the soundtrack is absolutely breathtaking. Even the stage select and password themes can correctly convey the things most important to the aspects of Belmont's Revenge, with their more melancholic feeling melodies, further driving home the point that you were a father who has lost your son to a man you thought you killed 15 years prior. Now, words could not explain how much love I have for this goofy little Game Boy entry. So much love, compassion, and effort went into capturing the Castlevania experience on the handheld. And honestly, this is probably love and effort that we'll never see again from Konami. And while it's sad to look at what Konami has become in recent years, which is to say a husk of its former self, there's joy to be had in the fact that so many of these games are now readily available for a new generation, with Konami re-releasing some really solid collections onto modern consoles. Castlevania 2's Belmont's Revenge may not be the best Castlevania, but for what it is and what it was, it's an amazing, fully fleshed out entry onto the series, which deserves a lot more attention, and just as much attention as Castlevania 3, or even my favourite, Rondo of Blood. Now this has been Backwards Compatible, the show where we explore video games of the past. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoy the episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider following me on Twitter and becoming a Patreon. Patrons have access regardless of how much they pledge. They can pledge $1 and have access to everything a $15 donor would get. The reason for this is because I feel like everyone should be able to get access to it, no matter how much they pay, but also I've still got to pay bills. But yeah. If you've enjoyed it, follow me on Twitter, join the Patreon, join my Discord down below. This is a great community already there from my streams. So check it out, I guess. Thank you.